Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are having a great time at the summit. Thank you all for joining us for the 22nd edition of the World Sustainable Development Summit, India's premier platform for deliberating in the discourse around sustainability and climate change. As we proceed further, it is my great privilege to host you all on behalf of the entire WSDS and TERI family. My name is Anushree Herde, and I'll be hosting you all for the session for this day on towards net zero emission target, electric vehicles and freight. The focus of the session will be primarily on future of electric vehicles, the transition in road freight sector. The opportunities and challenges from demand and supply side, as well as the infrastructure requirements will be discussed in the session. I now request Dr. Vibha Dhawan, Director General TERI, to deliver the welcome address. I welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and welcome all to this particular session and World Sustainable Development Summit. In fact, the plenary which we just now had, there was discussion on the question directly asked to Amazon, and that was how are you making your own freight sustainable? So therefore, what I want to say is the importance of this particular session, because as consumers, every stakeholder is worried about what I'm getting at home, is it sustainably delivered or not? And when we are talking towards net zero emission target and role of electric vehicles in freight, it is something which is dear to each one of us hearts. We are talking about, are electric vehicles sustainable? Should I shift to electric vehicles? And there are a number of questions of that kind. And we are very privileged that we have Mr. Dushyant Mudgal, Deputy Director General, Department of Posts, Government of India, Sameer, who was earlier part of TERI, Trupti, Dr. Sehag, who will be moderating, Amit, amongst us to debate on this particular issue. And especially as when I raised this question of Amazon, somewhere it is also because Department of Post has a huge responsibility of bringing letters which are gradually becoming outdated, but definitely parcels and other things which are being delivered by posts as well. But whatever we say, I think over a period of time, the e-commerce, the transportation is becoming extremely important. Because earlier you used to go once, do the shopping, but today it is perhaps 3 times a day. It's big baskets, it's Amazon, it's something else coming and delivering goods at your place. And I don't know how much that thing travels before it reaches us. Otherwise, also during COVID time and after COVID, we have also seen that many of us have moved from using public transport to our own vehicles. Look at the traffic. Even at 2 o'clock at night, you can find traffic jams on the road, which definitely shows that there is requirement that whatever is getting transported, it has to be clean. And it is putting a major burden on on emissions, and ultimately what we are talking about, climate change and so on. I really don't want to go into the details, and you will be getting all that statistical data from from the distinguished panelists who are with us today. But it is very crucial that India as a country, if we have to meet the net zero target and our high dependency on fossil fuel, which we are importing, it is best for us that we move towards EV technology, which so far is the best technology. I don't know in future whether it's going to remain the best or we'll have alternatives like hydrogen vehicles and so on. But today, perhaps that's the best technology, and therefore it becomes important for us to look into that EV remains one of the best options, but it is also clean, because EV alone can't do it. It is also how do you generate electricity to be used in those electric vehicles, and what kind of infrastructure do you require? The present EV technology, is it cost-effective option today? And we really have to look into whether it is for the light duty vehicles, whether it is going to be for medium or heavy duty vehicles, higher loading, long haul, and so on. And the present the opportunities that also gives us in terms of developing high density, low weight battery technology if we want to be successful. Now, as an institute, TERI has been working on creating awareness at national level about zero emission vehicles, as well as exploring business opportunities around EVs at the same time. And we have developed Sustainable Urban Freight Coalition website for promotion of commercial EVs, as well as e-Amrit portal launched by the NITI Aayog in November 21. The Sonoya Zero Pollution Mobility Campaign by NITI Aayog and RMI were launched in 2021 to promote the use of EV in urban freight deliveries and passenger mobility by providing visibility of commitments by partner companies through branding, as well as generating awareness and demand among public for zero emission deliveries and rides. Several companies and like Amazon, Flipkart, they have pledged to introduce EVs in their delivery fleet towards achieving their respective net zero targets. Like Amazon, 10,000 EVs by 2025, Flipkart, 25,000 by 2030, DPDHEL, 70% of first and last mile deliveries by bicycles and EVs by 2025. Road transport that accounts for more than 70% of India's freight transport and perhaps will continue its dominance position. And similarly, when we talk of commercial vehicles, that is buses and trucks, it's again more than 70% of India's freight transport. And again, it's going to remain in the dominance position. The unfortunate part is that more than 70% of the total diesel sold in the country is for the commercial vehicles. And that is why starting from the month of November, when in Delhi, we dread to face the kind of air pollution we have in this state. And then it is stopped the entry of diesel vehicles. And therefore, that also puts a lot of pressure on the vehicle owners as well. And of course, on each one of us, because we can't even breathe and we all have a cough in this city. But what I would like to say is now there is a general consciousness for the commercial vehicles as well. And I'll again share what we are intending to do in TERI. We have been given National Center of Excellence on green ports and shipping. So the moment we started discussing about that project, the very first thing was that, yes, it is very important that you take care of ships because they come from all over the world. But whatever goods they bring, they are ultimately to be transported. And therefore, if the commercial vehicles, that is trucks, if they are not clean or they are not using CNG or other cleaner modes, your ports can never be clean. And therefore, you have to see in the integrated way how to go about. So it's quite interesting because I'll say we are becoming conscious. We are trying to look in holistic view how to go about. It is not electric vehicle alone. It's the entire LCA analysis that must be done to see that where do we require, where it makes sense, and how to go about it. So with these words, I hand it over to Dr. Sehag, a very accomplished, I'll say he's a bureaucrat as well as a technocrat. And therefore, he can actually tell us what is technically possible and where are the problems in implementing those as policies. So over to you, Dr. Sehag.
Thank you, ma'am, for your introduction. Before Dr. Sehag begins the proceeding, we'll have a short context-setting presentation by Mr. Chakrabarti, Associate Fellow TERI.
Thank you so much. Hello. Good morning, everyone. including all the panelists here. So this is a very short presentation on like to set the context for today's discussion. So as we know, like how transport sector is contributing to emissions as well as its requirement for energy. So transport sector has been the third largest emitter as well as the energy consumer. And we know out of that, so more than 90% is of total GHG emission as well as energy demand is from transport. And there also, as ma'am has pointed out, like there is also increasing pollution from tailpipe emission and associated pollution in our cities. So that is another aspect of this transport sector. Also, we know that there is very high import dependency for our fuel, particularly for diesel and petrol. And here we see that oil usage in transport sector is almost entirely the petrol usage for our country, and more than 80% of diesel consumption is on account of transport. So this is the sectoral distribution of the diesel consumption, end user diesel consumption from TSC. So as we can see that transport sector accounts for more than 80%, and trucks alone account for more than 55, almost 55% of the diesel usage. Indian freight sector. So freight activity has in last 2 decades quadrupled, and road transport accounts alone for more than 70% of freight movement. And despite having like mission 3,000 million tons of set by road by Ministry of Railways, but still it will remain the single largest dominant sector to move freight. So trucks account for more than 50% if we now consider combined diesel and petrol usage. So that trucks alone account for more than 50% of the total usage in road transport. And to give a context, so Indian Railways, though it ships around 27-28% of all the freight, so it has a net zero target of 2030, and by now it has converted more than 80% of its broad gauge routes to electric. So there is a need to decarbonize the freight sector and for the net zero target from road transport. So this is a snapshot of annual vehicle sales from SIAM as well as a projection done by TERI. So as you can see that the sector is likely to grow in future also, but more specifically for the light goods vehicles. And now if we focus on the newly registered vehicle segment in India, so we see that by 2020, so I have taken here the post-FAME phase, so 15 onward. So by 2022, out of the newly registered vehicles, around less than 5% has been the penetration of EVs. However, the story is very different for three-wheelers. As we can see, more than 50% is on account of EVs, the newly registered vehicles. So these are some numbers. So basically, this is the cumulative number 2015 onwards till date. And as we can see, particularly, it's very concerning that goods vehicles, there is hardly any penetration, unlike the other segments. And the numbers, the absolute numbers also for each of the years tell the story compared to the all vehicle numbers. So these are in single digits or double digits in some of the years. However, there is a bit higher adoption for LGV sales. Particular concern is NGVs and NGVs. So, and this is as an example of state policy. So this is for Delhi particularly. So Delhi has been a success story in a sense that its adoption is much higher than the national average, and particularly for public buses and three-wheelers. And cumulative percentage also tells the story that public bus, like for bus segment, more than 6% is actually in cumulative stock run by EVs, and total is around 4%. Unlike the 1.17% or that I showed for the national average. So it clearly shows that there is a complementarity in the central policies and state policies. So they should come together and work hand in hand for better adoption of EV. So as ma'am has pointed out, so these are some of the targets set by different logistic companies. So like Amazon, DHL, so I will not repeat those numbers. So, and also TERI, with the support of India Post, we are undertaking a feasibility study, as ma'am has pointed out. to see the possible replacement of ICEVs that are used in postal service. So we are undertaking that study. Started on that. So this slide is on basically the technology acceptance models. So this follows from technology acceptance model. So how technology gets acceptance in the society. So for example, that ZDT adoption. So this adoption. So this has kind of demand side component, supply side component, as well as policy side component. So demand side, so these will have multiple behavioral components that contribute to the adoption of a vehicle. So like these are some of the examples, but there can be others. Like for example, price attractiveness of the vehicle, availability of financing, then availability of different models, then tier 2. So this will be applicable for ZDTs, tier 2 GVW ratio, and specification, different specification like mileage, acceleration, all these factors, availability of servicing, so service network, then charging infrastructure, and the total cost of operation aspect. So these can contribute to behavioral adoption or behavioral acceptance of electric vehicles for consumers. For supply side, like availability of supply chain network, then availability of skilled manpower, availability of readily available technology to actually manufacture this particular ZDTs, and then tax benefit and incentives for charging infrastructure development. These can be crucial components for supply chain perspective and policy side from government perspective. So changing the fuel prices. So as the fuel price gap gets higher between the conventional fuel as well as the electricity. So that can have an impact on adoption, as well as there can be fiscal incentives like subsidy schemes and other fiscal incentives, then reduced taxation or income tax relaxation, as well as there can be stringent emission norms set by the regulatory authorities. Then there can be entry restrictions as Delhi sometimes follows within the city. Then there can be dedicated lane access available to the EVs, and there can be preferential parking also available for these electric vehicles. With that, so these are some of the discussion points that will be revolving around technological aspects, and then complementarity about the BEVs as well as the potential fuel cell, whether that is feasible or not, and then some constraints that OEMs face, and financing aspect of that, and the role of non-banking financial institutions, and then some policy aspects. Then if retrofitting can be acting as a kind of middle, we have adoption. Then what can be the possible demand constraints within the consumers? Then how to address the range anxiety among the purchasers? So whether through any kind of battery swapping, if it is feasible for this segment, and whether pantograph kind of charging throughout the road network that is possible, at least in some of the dedicated corridors. And we will also be interested to know about the global activities. Thank you.
For the session, your presentation. Without any further ado, I request Dr. A.R. Sihab to conduct the proceedings of the session. Dr. Sihab is a public policy professional with close to 4 decades of experience in policy making, research, execution, and teaching, and is presently engaged with TERI as a distinguished fellow. He has a master's and PhD in economics from Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, USA. As a career civil servant from the Indian Administrative Service, his experience spans higher echelons of government at the central and state levels in India, with stints in non-profit and multilateral institutions. We welcome you. I would now hand over the session.
Thank you, and a very warm welcome to all the participants for this session. We have had the benefit of hearing DG TERI about the session and about the priorities in TERI and around among stakeholders. I would, before I start, introduce all the speakers. So bear with me and please applaud the distinguished panel that we have here. So we have with us Mr. Sameer Pandita, Director at the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which is a very major regulator in the energy sector. Several initiatives relating to energy efficiency have been pushed through by the organization. He has also prior background with TERI, and he has told me privately that he is among the guilty men who conceived FAME 2 together with me. So we used to have meetings and he has participated in those. I'll tell you why guilty man as far as this session is concerned a little later when I make a confession. Now, Mr. Mohan on my left here is the CEO at Delhi EV Cell, constituted under the Transport Department of the Government of NCT. He has more than 17 years of experience in project management, implementation of clean energy projects, developing distinctive business strategy, EV policies, and integrating digital ecosystem for e-mobility and regulatory experience. Now, his role is very crucial because I remember when we were doing FAME1, the pilot project for the buses, which was the first major public transport, heavy vehicle related initiative. We had, a lot of hopes from Delhi government in terms of being, because it was a city in which we have had the air quality issues. And we thought large number of buses could go to Delhi alone. But for some reason, because of the institutional gaps at that time in the setup, that could not happen. And it, I think, repeatedly did not happen on 2 occasions. I was very happy to see recent news about what's happening in the electric mobility sector in Delhi, particularly relating to buses. And I'm sure he and his team are playing a big role in this transformation of Delhi's response to electric mobility. Then Trupti Deshpande is the Senior Program Manager, Electric Mobility, Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, who promote a lot of research and promotional activities relating to clean energy and electric mobility. She comes with 8 years of experience in urban planning, urban transport, clean transport, and electric mobility. So welcome to this session. Amit Bhatt, on the left here, is the ICCT's Managing Director for India. He is based in New Delhi and has over 20 years of experience in transportation, urban development, and management. So we have 2 urban professionals on the left and the right. We are flanked by the urban, which is very important because one major segment of freight is going to be within urban areas. He has a background in WRI, Urban Mass Transit Company, which was another of players which was involved in that guilty exercise that I mentioned. And he's served as adjunct faculty in School of Planning and Architecture. Mr. Umesh Ravankar is the financier among us, the guy with the money bags for us. He is the Executive Vice Chairman at Sriram Finance. Mr. Ravankar has 3.5 decades of leadership experience in financial services industry. And for the, he started his career and has stayed on, I think, with Sriram Group for the last so many years, since 1987. Finance plays a very important role for freight mobility, for freight sector. And that was one of the considerations, I'll tell you, when I said I'm going to confess to the guilt on freight. One of the consideration was that there is finance available for freight sector. So the confession begins like this, that when I joined the DHI in 2017, we had the FAME1 at that time. And in FAME1, mostly what was being financed by way of clean vehicles was the lead acid battery vehicles, mostly some hybrid, the low efficiency hybrids, and some 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers based on approval of individual models. And of the budget that had been sanctioned for the 2-year period, which had already got over, and we were on extension, there was only about 20% of the budget had been spent. So I had several considerations. One was that before the scheme expires, because repeated extensions are unlikely, how we can use this commitment of the government to promote the purpose, which was electric mobility, in the shortest possible time, while taking into account the attributes of electric mobility that are very important. So keeping that in mind, we thought one of the considerations of spending public money on electric mobility should be that the asset that you create should have very high capacity utilization. That was one core consideration of conceiving the pilot project. There was a window called pilot project when it came one. So one consideration of conceiving a bus pilot under this was that it should be able to have a large capacity utilization. And that is one of the common characteristics freight sector also has, high capacity utilization. And the three-wheeler sector also, and taxis. So in general, the preference was that we will focus on those areas where there is public shared mobility as for promoting electric mobility with public fund expenses. And in FAME 1, we could do only a bus pilot, which was only about 7 to 8 month window in which we had to do it. It started in October. By March, orders have been placed for purchase of buses. And I think the OEMs relating to electric buses were really energized with the process. And ever since we have had this subsequent follow-up on FAME 2 also. When we came to FAME 2, the question came, what should be its focus? And I am confessing to the guilt because the focus actually remained on passenger side of the traffic in FAME 2, as we had just initiated in FAME 1. And the reason largely for that was twofold. One was that the freight sector has the access to, because there is asset financing of freight sector vehicles. Mr. Ravanka does that so much of it. So we thought some of the lifting, heavy lifting, which the government wants to do with subsidy in terms of bridging the viability and financing and life cycle financing gap through initial subsidy, would be automatically built into a long life based financing in the freight sector. That was one consideration why FAME 2 did not actually give a major emphasis on upfront emphasis. I'll tell you, it was not left out completely, but why it would not give a major upfront emphasis as it did to things like buses, where numbers were specified that we will target so many numbers of taxis, so many numbers of buses, three-wheelers, and two-wheelers. The other was that a large part of the freight segment has depends on a kind of a network externality, which is spread over a very large geographic area. So if a truck that starts from, say, Ludhiana in Punjab might go to Tirunelveli in Tamil Nadu. And if you are going to, unless we have the entire infrastructure for charging, the entire network, it would not be possible to conceive of such long distance trucking being supported immediately by way of electric vehicles. And therefore, this will need to be taken in parts, and we need to have solutions which will gradually build. That was the second consideration in doing this. But we did not leave out, as it may appear from a plain reading of FAME 2 and my use of the word guilt, we didn't completely leave out the freight sector. There were two, in our conception, there were two things for FAME 2 for freight sector. One was that we would have a window called the pilot projects. So in the original concept of FAME 2, there was a pilot project. This may be relevant for some of the discussions we have, because this is unfinished business of FAME 2. So in the pilot project, it was conceived that we will take up these incremental segments where there is point-to-point heavy trucking, and where we can provide support by way of charging infrastructure on the highways and any other solutions, which means trolley trucks or any other new technological solutions to which we don't have to preconceive. We will develop them in consultation with the stakeholders. So unfortunately, what happened as the government policies filter through various stakeholders, it starts with one department and goes to various other departments and goes to Niti Aayog, and then it goes to higher levels in government. So when it went through those processes, some wiser view prevailed, and they said we don't need the pilot projects at all. So there are some unknown guilty people also who deleted that window for the traffic, freight traffic, which would have been very handy. And that's why I'm saying that maybe this the deliberations we have might call for thinking of that kind of an opportunity or a window as we go forward. So that that was one thing. The other one, of course, was that we still provided for highway charging stations on highways, large number of charging stations at every 20-25 kilometers. So if there was somebody really determined to put a battery in a truck and go trucking on the highways, they were not really completely high and dry, but we knew that this is not going to be sufficient. This is not how people will take commercial decisions in terms of committing their resources and choosing the kind of modality of transport they will use for freight. So this background, I thought I should give you. And I also want to share, apart from the questions which Rahul has put out very nicely to help us to keep focused, when I think about the issues that we may be debating today, there are kind of that old school thing, called Venn diagram. A Venn diagram comes to my mind. That is, one circle is technology, one is policy, and one is finance. And if something I've left out, feel free to add your own to this. And what happens is when we are discussing issues, there will be some that may be pure technical issues, technology issues. There will be some that will be at the interface of technology and policy. For example, the whole question about, so pure technology will be, as he has mentioned on the supply side, issues relating to, do we have enough models? Technically, do we have enough trucks being either manufactured in India or importable from abroad also? Do we have them for the trucking requirement? Whether they are BEV trucks or whether they are trolley trucks or any other, fuel cell trucks, do we have? So that technology question is there. We have to start from there. But the moment we have that, and when we move a little towards policy side, there is the regulatory policy issue. The first level of policy that will impact is the regulatory policy, which says, okay, so if there are trucks, have I approved them? Are the models approved? So there have been, for a long time on the passenger side, a lot of people claiming to have a lot of models, but they did not have approved models at all, right up to the launch of FAME 2. So you will need regulatory policy that will respond to the requirement. And there you need capacity in the certifying institutions that we have. Similarly, you have a question of policy financing. So if, for example, Mr. Ravankar is able to straight away walk in and finance a truck, which is electric, which is all very well. I mean, our problem is solved. But most of the times what happens is he may have a little greater latitude, but banks don't have that kind of latitude. Even they finance large number of trucks. They have something called approved models for financing trucks. So not only do the models have to be approved by the regulators, but they have to also approve by financials. So there is that finance interface. Then we look at policy and finance interface. On the policies, pure policy side, as far as finance is concerned, you will have things like fiscal incentives, subsidies, interest subsidies, income tax benefits, all of those kinds of things are there. In terms of your interface between policy and finance, you will have things like somebody asking, can we make this priority sector lending if we are financing electric vehicles? So there are those sets of issues. So this kind of a taxonomy of issues is what we will need to deal with when we have these discussions. I was expecting here Mr. Sudhendu Sinha from Niti Aayog to share his views with us. But guess what? He is already doing our job. He's been called to PMO for a meeting. So hopefully he will be taking all the decisions that we are going to be deliberating about here. But if not, we will pass on what we conclude here. Maybe it will be useful to Niti Aayog. So with these words, I will now invite Mr. Sameer Pandita to share his views with us.
Thank you, Sharak Saab. It's in fact a pleasure being here. As you already mentioned, I've been a part of this family before. So it's a pleasure being here again today and speaking on a subject which I've never dealt with prior to this instance. So I work for a regulator, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. We are the central nodal agency for coordinating the rollout of public charging infrastructure in the country. And we do not per se deal with the vehicles as such, though I've been a part of, in my past engagements, a part of FAME for formulation committees. As far as freight sector is concerned, freight per se, what should I say, it's a very nascent sector, and it contributes immensely to the about 200 odd million tons of CO2 emissions is attributed to this freight sector. The sector has about, an estimate says, about 11 million freight vehicles, majority of which are in the LMV category. And about the majority, by majority I mean about somewhere between 58% and 60% of the fleet is in the LMV category. While as about somewhere around 38 to 40% is in the HDV category. But the problem is that the HDV category fleet is responsible for more than 80% of the total emissions from this sector. We have, TERI has shown us the statistics, and they were very interesting statistics. So I would also like to share with you what little I know about this sector. About 2/3 of the total goods that are transported in this country happen on the road. And this is done using diesel trucks, essentially, which are very inefficient and they pollute a lot. So as a government agency and a regulator, my outlook is that I have an objective to meet, a target to meet, and that is I have to reduce the emission of our economy by the emission intensity of our economy by about 45% by the year 2030. And in order to achieve that, this is a very important sector, especially transport per se is a very important sector. And if I look at the freight segment, it is going to play a very important role. Now, most of the discussions that have been happening around in the conferences focus more on the EVs, but let me tell you, this is not the only strategy using which we can actually decarbonize. We need to look at other things. There are other strategies like modal shift, and in fact, modal shift is going to contribute the highest. It has the highest potential of CO2 abatement, followed by electrification of our highways, inland cargo transportation, coastal shipping. These are the things which are having higher potential than actual electrification. Electrification is like in the order of priority, it would be somewhere around 3 or 4. So we need to look at other options also. I mean, we have to explore biodiesel for heavy duty trucking, long haulage trucking, for the cargo haulage. Other options like ZEVs. ZEVs is very, very nascent. I mean, I cannot at the moment tell you how many OEMs are actually there making fuel cell electric vehicles or diesel hybrid trucks as such in the country. If my memory serves me well, I recall of 2 OEMs, that is BYD. It makes about 40 ton of truck category. It is manufacturing that truck. And there is one more called Renault in 55 ton category. So this is essentially the HDVs. Electrification in the LMV segment of it, the freight segment is not an issue, it will pick up. But if we talk about the HDVs, which is the major contributor, but the technology is still not there. So what I would like to, from the points of discussion that are there before me, I would like to say that technology is something which is going to solve the puzzle for me. Until or unless we have a solution which is tailor-made for the Indian conditions in terms of the environment, the extremities that are there, that the country faces along the lengths and breadths of the country, the temperature varies. And until unless that product is deeply engineered enough to withstand the geographical conditions in terms of gradients, in terms of inclines that our HDVs are experiencing, or until or unless our technology, the HDV that we are going to bring into this country, is able to withstand the abuse in terms of overloading and all, which our diesel trucking is subjected to. I don't think we are moving ahead. So all this needs to be, a solution has to be tailor-made for Indian conditions. Secondly, I would say that if we look at currently the EVs within the cities, we don't have skilled manpower to service the EVs within the cities. Forget about highways and expressways. So second main issue, according to me, is we need to skill people. We need to provide skilled service providers, so that this long haulage can take place. One thing I'm very clear here about long distance haulage is road transport cannot compete with railways. It's far more inefficient. But yes, railways does have its own constraints in the terms of last mile connectivity. There we can definitely have a look at electrifying the stock that is there for last mile connectivity. That can be looked at. And charging infrastructure per se, we have been working pretty hard. The government has been working pretty hard. Siag Sahab has been involved in sanctioning certain charging stations on the expressways and highways. Every 25 kilometers we had proposed a charger, and every 100 kilometers a charger, an ultra-fast charger. Standards have been brought in already by the DST and the BIS. Standard is not a problem as far as charging infrastructure is concerned. It will come up. But again, I like to say that road transportation is not going to anyways compete with, it's far more inefficient compared to rail transport. My suggestion here is that we should initially identify certain routes, zero emission routes, which have defined routes as well as defined ranges, which can then be electrified. We can couple this with certain business verticals like frozen food or maybe pharma. One of such routes is like Goa to Mumbai, wherein reefer vans are being used presently. They are employing phase change material, so there is no need of a compressor, and they are good, very good vans, very efficient vans. Such routes can be identified across the country to begin with, and such routes can be electrified. Standardization across, well, being a regulator, I will talk about standards. Anything that comes and has to apply in the country has to be ARA certified or NABL certified. It's same for the chargers as well as the vehicles. So my next take is that there has to be standardization across the vehicles. Charging infrastructure is already, it has been done. One very important aspect that has come across is the telematics or the telemetry or the backend systems, which actually give us the information about the charging network. So that has to be standardized. Currently, our FAME scheme does not have any provision for demand incentive, as Siag Sahab mentioned, for the freight vehicles per se. I don't know how successful that would be, even if demand incentives are brought in. How much ECUs, but still it has to be there, it has to be brought up. NBCs and lending institutions, they are currently, to be very frank, not very sure about the technologies which are currently there for the electrification of LMVs as well as the HDVs. To completely forget, it is the technology itself is not there. It is not certified. Until unless there is some sense of a confidence, some sense of that surety in the NBCs that they will get the money back which they are investing, it will be very difficult to attract the NBCs. I hope that our colleague who is here, the panelist who is here from the representing the NBC will be reiterating on this aspect that I have hinted upon. Pilot projects, yes, as Siak Saab said, pilot projects is something that should be looked upon, and we per se, I will say that we are actually working with IIT Delhi to explore pantograph charging for HDVs on the highways. But again, those corridors have to be identified. First, there has to be a survey. This pantographic charging within the cities, how successful they will be, can't be said. No studies there as of now. And such pilots are definitely going to give us the inputs. The outcome of these studies are actually going to fine-tune the policies that we are making. And the inputs will go there. So this is a little bit what I wanted to tell about the HDVs. Regarding buses, I see buses, e-buses to be completely different than the HDVs. I mean, buses, most of them currently are operating intracity. Intracity buses are few. And the anxieties of the LMVs and the buses per se, they are more so addressed within the city limits. But here we are talking about the trucks which are going to ferry cargoes between the cities and in different geographies. To me, some surety has to be there as far as technologies is concerned. Otherwise, for me, in a nutshell, technology is the only thing that we need to work on. Before that, even if we bring in the policies, I don't think how fast we can go ahead with this and anxieties can be addressed. So that's all I wanted to say about the HDVs from the limited knowledge that I have had over the past 2-3 days going through the subject, because as I mentioned, we actually do not work, but in the years ahead, definitely we will have to work. Already we have built in provisions in our guidelines. Let me tell you though, yes, I forgot to mention that the Ministry of Power guidelines had brought in the provision for ultra-fast chargers way back in 2018. So we had defined the deployment density of the chargers that are required on the highways and what specification of chargers are required on the highways and what would be the rating of these chargers. So that has already been defined. And where in the cities and on the highways will these chargers be deployed? That has already been brought into the guidelines of the Ministry of Power way back in 2018. So as far as charging infrastructure is concerned, most of the problems, regulations have been addressed. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pandita. I think in fact, you mentioned the elephant in the room, which is that the traffic, the freight traffic, the modality change to railway is probably the most productive way of approaching this problem. That is kind of well recognized, and we will approach it, I think, in a different session somewhere. But for this session, we are concentrating on this 30% problem, which is 30% of the emissions in freight transport coming from the trucking business. So can we make some headway on that? And thank you for also bringing out all the initiatives relating to standardization and all of the Ministry of Power. Now I'll request Mr. N Mohan to share his comments.
So good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Siag, and in good way part of this discussion. So maybe I'll touch upon some of the key issues, key discussion points which we are trying to address here. Technology. I think we have to be The electric bus example is set a phase for electric.
Sorry, can I interrupt for a moment? I think I have to warn the speakers as a moderator. It was my duty, which I forgot, that your lunch. So longer we take, the later will be the lunch. Otherwise, I don't think there's any other constraint. So, so it's all right. Thank you. Okay, so there.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it short. I think some of the key points which I want to at least bring out here. Technology exists. If you look at the heavy duty vehicle segment, especially electric bus segment, it has shown the technology is more available in the market when the driving range kilometers is less than 200 kilometers. But when it comes to like battery electric vehicle trucks, where the long haul or distance traveling is a much of a requirement, what are the key issues or challenges? The one being the charging infrastructure. So if you want to enable the battery electric vehicle trucks to be like more adopted nationally, then we need to ensure there is a robust charging network, and we have to build up like more fast charging solutions too. Like told by the Pandita, charging could be one solution. But building such infrastructure would require a high power quality infrastructure, especially when it comes to urban areas. Yes, we have at least like network in place where such solutions could be built up. But here we're talking about some of the like other than urban areas, especially on the highways and the expressways, where the electrical infra doesn't exist. So we need to create that exclusive infrastructure if you want to have this transition of battery electric vehicle trucks for long distance traveling. Specifically, just coming to the Delhi instance here, if I talk about our interventions in light commercial vehicles, which are less than 3.5 tons of gross vehicle weight, we have a good experience so far when it comes to like three-wheelers cargo carriers. So we're percent registration the last calendar year 2022. It shows there is a larger acceptance for the urban freight is concerned, but when it comes to like the next level of vehicle segments, which we typically call the N1 category goods carriers, which are basically four-wheelers with which typically used for the goods. Typically, we call Chota Hathi or Tata Ace vehicle. We seen the OEMs are bringing out more models in this particular segment too, but still the price difference between the IC counterpart and the electric vehicle is a major concern here. If you look at the constraint for OEMs, why OEMs are not very keen to bring out the electric trucks here. So largely there is no clear demand or demand to set up those supply chains for the electric trucks. Here, I think we can set an example of electric bus where the CSL has done the aggregation of electric buses across different STUs. They're able to bring a clear demand for the OEMs. Now the OEMs have the strength and supply chain established where they could roll out more electric buses for the STUs. The similar exercise needs to be done for the trucking segment also. The second is the policy support and the policy incentive. If you look at the national policies and the subnational policies, so we're pretty much silent on the electric trucks. We only speak on the two-wheelers, three-wheelers, and the four-wheelers, and to some extent the public transport, which are more on the electric bus segment. But none of the existing policies speak on the truck per se. So the entire national, subnational policies are more silent on this particular application. There could be divergent opinions on this because we are talking about multiple fuel paths also. Right now, whenever we talk about the electric trucks, there is a kind of perception that these trucks, maybe like urban freight could be one different category, and maybe like long haul application could be a different category, because there we talk about the hydrogen fuel cell as one of the option. We talk about hydrogen IC trucks as one of the options. We also try to compare the battery electric vehicle trucks too. So the fuel path is differentiating a kind of larger acceptance at the national scenario. So many startups have bring out a model display in the Auto Expo 2023. Also, we have seen the people displaying the battery electric vehicle trucks. We have seen the LNG trucks. We have seen the CNG versions. We have seen the fuel cell electric vehicle trucks also. There's a larger acceptance. The models are available. Until we bring in the demand in the market, it will be difficult for OEMs to establish a strong supply chain network. In Delhi, we are also working with the International Council on Clean Transportation. The plan is to like identify the champion application, because within the government departments, we have different trucks being deployed. So be it horticulture department or a garbage collection or garbage dumpers, we have your water tankers. So we're trying to analyze a specific use case which could be easily transitioned towards the electrifying those segments. In this, as a part of a study, we're also trying to do a simulation or a pilot study, which will give a real kind of scenario how this IC counterpart could be electrified without even affecting their the application, the payload requirement. So moment we say the long haul applications, we think of like increasing the battery capacity. So once we look at increasing the battery capacity, we're trying to like compromise on the payload. So which will at least like defeat the purpose of having a long trucks and high mass carriage capacity. In the policy side, yes, of course, there is a little gap is with respect to the trucking segment, but the charging infrastructure, there is a clearly the Ministry of Power guidelines mention about the L4 level charging also, where they defines the 250 kilowatt, 500 kilowatt of charging that could be built up along the highways and the expressways. But presently, the FAME 2 infra is more confined for the lighter vehicle segments. So where we see the deployment happening at the city level, and also we're seeing deployment happening at the highways and the expressways. But is it a scalable infrastructure? Because more or less like the industry is more inclined towards adopting the CCS2 technology for the four-wheelers. The same we would at least like presume would be followed for the trucks and the electric buses too. The existing infra which are being built under the FAME 2 scheme, I think we need to open up an discussion where this infra could be made scalable. So presently there is the capacity of the 50 kilowatt for an CCS2 charging station, which is a minimum requirement. If we can able to upscale, or if we're able to, there's a provision to upgrade the existing infra, say up to say 150 or 200 kilowatt capacity, then this infra could be used by multiple vehicle segments, be it for four-wheelers, be it for buses, be it for other trucks. So such, I think, scalable infra has to be made or promoted by under the FAME 2 scheme, which will help to build the infra for all segments instead of like only focusing on a specific vehicle segment under the FAME 2 scheme. Another interesting point being in the trucking segment. Here, if you look at the ownership of the trucks, so we have a lot of small ownerships where the ownership lies somewhere between 5 to 10 electric trucks, which constitute close to 70% of the overall populations. And these are little risk averse when it comes to adoption of the battery electric vehicles, since they being in comparatively low small operators. They will not like to at least like put a step towards like adopting that battery electric vehicles. The same applies to the financing also. Until unless they know it is a proven technology, there is a strong resale market. The financing could be somewhat constrained, especially in the trucking segment is concerned. The one solution could be, I think, some of the pilots could be run to give that confidence to the financing companies too. So at least they can look at the robustness of the technology, and further they could at least like see how the financing terms could be determined for those operators who wants like have these electric vehicles in their fleet. If you look at the transition in the ownership of the existing IC trucks, it changes over like 3 to 4 owners for the lifetime of like 15 to 20 years. So this is one thing where we need to have established resale market. So where OEMs could play a major role, because until unless the OEMs like bring out a robust technology where they can define there is a resale market or a resale value for the trucks, the financing could still be an limitation. This we have seen in especially in the lower segment, especially three-wheelers and four-wheelers too, because we have seen the interest rates varying from say 15% is going as 25%. The considering the risk perception the financing companies would have. Something on the retrofitting, I think we can take a clue from the CNG experience. I think when the CNG retrofit started, it was more a kind of the industry requirement. So where the certification happened, gradually the consumer started trying CNG because of the low running cost. But in case of retrofitting, some of the startup companies are doing the pilots. The challenge being there is no endorsement of the OEMs. So until unless the OEMs endorse the retrofitting solutions, the cost will not come down, and even the financing could be a major challenge. So I think right now, if you look at the CNG market, the most of the vehicle OEMs, they're offering as a factory fitted CNG kits. So if something similar could be worked around on having the retrofit for the trucks, where the endorsement and technology could be defined and at least like approved by the OEMs, then the scalability will be much faster. We talk about policy, but I feel there is a little gap when it comes to like framing a policy and the implementation. So we always need to look at or towards like focus towards like implementing the policy measures. So in Delhi, what Delhi EV cell, which I represent, so our main mandate is to implement the policy measures in the EV policy. So defining a EV policy is a first step, but doing it an effective implementation is a major progress. In Delhi also, like we're able to just like implement close to 83%, I would say, is the achievement. But since there is certain gaps which you are trying to improvise and do it at a quicker phase. But largely, I think corporate engagement is one thing I think which we could look at if you want to have this transition in the truck segment. And I think addressing range anxiety is there is no solution. We have to enable those the infrastructure. And definitely, I think the incentive, maybe like the FAME scheme, would be extended for the trucks also in coming the next phase of the FAME. So there is a structured incentive which can go to the trucking segment. So at least adoption could happen at the state and the government institution level. Here, I think a time has come where government could act as a consumer, because this is what we are seeing in the electric bus too, because the government created the demand for the OEMs and where government themselves become a kind of consumer. Can we look at a solution where government becomes a consumer for a trucking requirement also? Then this aggregation could help, and at least we can bring out a clear indication to the market or industry that bring out such electric vehicles for specific application. So these are some of my initial thoughts, and thank you so much.
Mr. Mohan, thank you for making several important points. I think you highlighted one of OEMs. You talked about the distinction between the long distance freight and the city freight. You talked about aggregation, demand aggregation, utility of it. You talked about scalability of infrastructure, the charging. So, and you above all talked about implementation of policy, which is also important because capacity for implementation has to be built up in various state governments. Now I request Ms Trupti Deshpande to share with us her thoughts.
Experts in the field, I have put together a few thoughts. So basically, the challenges we all know that the freight market is quite fragmented in India, and there are very less share with the biggies, and very less vehicles are actually aggregated. So targeting this fleet owners is a difficult task. To bring them together under one umbrella is a major challenge in front of the government or OEMs. OEMs also cannot come up with different models because they need demand. Till the time we don't have demand, they also cannot put in that much investment in setting up a new plant. So that also remains a challenge with us. We also lack business models to take up such a big risk of investing in HDVs especially. So basically, few incentives from government side, few regulations from government side, some investment from the OEM. So basically, there needs to be a coalition between fleet owners and manufacturers, wherein the fleet owners put forth their requirement to the manufacturers, and manufacturers maybe can come up with a model which suffices their demand. In case of buses, we had BYD trial bus, which was a good push for the e-bus industry in India. So that kind of trial run, if we get one truck model, HDV model, and allow different fleet owners to actually run it as a pilot, basically the investment load, the burden is divided. It gets shared between multiple fleet owners. And then we also have actual pilot running, so we can actually see what the challenges are. Does that model work for us? What technical requirements we have in Indian conditions, And that I think will provide a good basis for this particular area. We already are talking about scrapping policy and regulatory mandate and emission norms, which can be a supply side regulation. Definitely incentives need to be there, at least for the starting push for the freight, because upfront cost is anyways high. And as we know, insurance cost is also high for electric vehicles. Loan schemes are kind of less, options are available. Not all banks are willing to fund or willing to provide loan to this particular area. Another thing is, I would like to say that we are happily supporting many of the studies talked about here. We are supporting proof of concept in the early use cases. We are supporting skilling. We are supporting coalition, which we are trying to bring together all the stakeholders who will work together and come up with a possible solution in the e-freight segment. I also think that when we talk about urban freight, we need to also focus on tier 2, tier 3 cities, because at least post-COVID, urban deliveries have increased, highly increased, exponentially increased in tier 2, tier 3 cities. And if we develop the infrastructure there right away, it will be a good push in the long run. To conclude the thing, I would talk about 3 A's that the e-freight industry needs to focus. One is, all the stakeholders need to have ambition to work towards e-freight. For that, we need actions from the government, from policymakers, as well as from the fleet owners. And we need to be accountable to our ambition and our actions. So that is something that will bring in the change in the industry.
Thank you for your very pithy comments. I think you have highlighted the importance of the role of OEMs. Even the previous speaker mentioned about that. In that, I have personally been wondering whether there is a need to kind of energize the startup ecosystem, because so much that happened on the passenger side was related to what the startups were doing, and they were setting the pace for the main OEMs, because main OEMs are heavily invested in ICE technology. So for them to, in the beginning, get on to the e-vehicle bandwagon is a little hard internally, structurally. So role of startups, I think, would be important. And you mentioned about tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Yes, that's a very important segment. And I think this study that TERI is taking up with Postal Department on the their motor mail services and all. Right now, it will be focused on the large cities, but eventually its utility should be demonstrated through taking it all the way down to smaller cities. Thank you. Now, next I request Mr. Amit Bhatt, MD of the ICCT.
Thank you, sir. I did not have a very good breakfast, so I'll be very quick. So I think what's really interesting is this whole issue of electrification of or heavy duty vehicle segment. And we are talking about 3% of fleet that is responsible more than half of particulate matter emission, half of CO2 emission, and half of diesel consumption. So when we look at this Venn diagram, where I put public health, I put green climate, and I put self-reliance on our Atmanirbharta, as Prime Minister calls, something has to be done because it's not going in the right direction. What is it that we can all brainstorm? But I'll share some example, which was very interesting, which happened last week. So last week, the European Union came up with a fuel economy CO2 standards for the heavy duty vehicle segment. And some of the takeaways, I think, is very, very interesting for all of us to look at. Few things that came out very interestingly. One, they said all the city buses should be zero emission by 2030. A clear direction on the bus front. The other was that almost 90% of trucks would be zero emission by 2040. So what it is telling me is that it is giving me an indication where the industry should be headed. And that comes from the backing that there is technology is available. And that's in their context, the economics is also working in this manner. Otherwise, obviously, industry will revolt and you can't have anything on the ground. What's even more interesting is that there are also some interim targets which are very interesting. So, for example, as I said, 60%, 65% by 2035, leading to 90% by 2040. And then almost looking at 100% of electrification in the bus category segment. The other interesting thing is that in this space of zero emission, we are left with two choices, hydrogen fuel cell or battery electric. We have seen that group companies like Triton, which is a part of larger MAN and other OEMs, they have committed to battery electric as the technology forward. Similarly, we have also seen announcement by Scania and Daimler, where they have pledged to go beyond 90% regulation from 2040 onwards. In fact, they are looking at almost close to 40%. And these two manufacturers account for almost a third of the market. What's even more interesting is the fact that so this is a path which has been created by a regulation which looks at CO2 emission from the heavy duty vehicle segment. Now, why it is important for us? And I think I have 4 points to tell. One, this tells us that technology is available. And then in their context, the economics is also working in this favor. So that addresses the first question, right? Technology and cost. Second is, India has historically been following the European automotive industry in most of our regulation, be it BS6, BS4, and so on and so forth. And there's some lag by odd years. So it's also good to understand what is happening in Europe, because sometime it will also come to India. So that's point number 2. Point number 3, which is very interesting, is that we expect UK to come with similar regulation in 3rd quarter of this year, if not 4th. And then we expect US to come up with similar regulation in the 1st quarter of next year. So in next 1 year, we will get a clear indication from Europe, UK, and US in terms of the pathways for heavy duty and medium duty commercial vehicle. And given the commitments or the announcements or news item that they have come, it is all moving towards zero emission with a huge share with battery electric trucks. So that's what the world is doing. The question is, what do we do? And I think this is where we'll have to figure a way out that how do we start this conversation early so that we address these 3 broad buckets, which I told earlier, but also the industry is not left behind, because when the world is moving to one direction, we cannot move to the other direction. So I think this is where I think what is very important. So I think the next round of FAME would be very interesting for us to see, especially inclusion of freight. And the other big missing piece, and I think which we have to solve sooner than later, we have looked at electric mobility adoption from mostly demand-sized incentives. We also have to look at the regulatory aspects. So I think the CO2 emission regulation is a great regulatory measure with the Europe advantage. We don't have such a regulation, but we have something called fuel economy standards, in which BEE is championing. So the question is, can we leverage the fuel economy or fuel consumption standards to push for electrification? I think that will be a fantastic opportunity, and linking into Frame 3, I think would really accelerate this path of transition. That's where I learned. Thank you so much.
For your sharply focused comments, you told us about the global trends in regulation and how regulation is being used to promote electric vehicles. It's a very important issue for India also probably, but traditional history in India of trying to promote behavioral change has been incentive-based. We have been always fighting shy of, mandates. But I think in the new spirit of sacrifice that is prevailing in the nation, maybe we will now move to mandates also. And CAFE is a window through which we can think of some kind of mandates. But when you talk about mandates to OEMs, I don't think they like it very much. So let us see where the cookie crumbles on that one. Now I request the most important person, Mr. Umesh Ramanka. He has got the money. So please tell us how it fits in, our aspiration for electric trucking, how it fits in with this, where the money is.
Thank you. Let me first give some information. Out of our total portfolio, 50% of my portfolio, loan portfolio, is heavy commercial vehicle. So, suddenly everybody's attention will be on me. And 70%. Because
in Willie Sutton rule, you can check. So Willie Sutton rule is that there was this gangster in New York who was arrested in bank robbing charges. And when he was released, the press wallahs came to him as they always come, and one of them asked him a question, Mr. Sutton, why do you rob banks? So his reply is known now in management jargon as the Willie Sutton rule. He replied, he said, that's where the money is. So go on.
Yeah. The 70% of the ownership of the vehicles are still with individual or small operators. And the viability to them comes out of capital cost. What is the money they invest or take a loan in acquiring the vehicle? Now, for them to change the behavior and change the ownership, then we need to see what is the cost involved. For example, is a sub 1 ton vehicle, Tata Ace. A petrol version costs 4 lakh, 4 plus. Diesel version costs around 5 plus. CNG version costs 6 plus or around 6. Electric not come into the market, it's already pre-booked by e-commerce people, is around 8 lakhs. Now, even if you are giving 100% interest rate subsidy, still your payback time, and if you think of battery life is around 4 years or 3 years, and 60% or 70% of the cost of the vehicle is battery, and you need to replace it, that means it's totally unviable for an individual to own that vehicle. You can't think of, unless like Amazon, Flipkart and all, they can own it probably because of the social purpose. They can come out with the social purpose and own it. So the individuals to change, it needs some kind of a improvement in the vehicle manufacturing in such a way that cost comes down. And in a way, if you look at the engines used by the heavy commercial vehicle, Cummins, Iveco, Mercedes, Volvo, all are either European and US. If they have a standard, as rightly said now, that by 40 you reach a particular standard, then definitely support to those engine stops and India will fall in line automatically. Maybe 10 years later, that's something that's going to happen. So India is not going to be totally different. We don't have separate technology in manufacturing more efficient engines. So I think it will automatically happen. But cost of ownership is something which we need to address, because for a financier, ultimately we need to lend and collect the money back. And it has to become viable for an individual to own and enjoy the ownership of the vehicle. I believe interim, what is going to happen or what is happening, especially the CNG, the way CNG moved into or forced into cities, especially all 3-wheelers and 4-wheelers in the city. When the CNG supply was not there, I could see miles of queue and it was forced. And in Delhi, I remember, if you ask any address, they'll say, you go to this CNG station, and from there you go there. Something like that means CNG station used to be so rare, and you will see miles of queue. So that was the situation around 5-6 years back. It has changed. There is enough CNG stations in larger metro. So therefore, the ownership of CNG vehicle has become better, even though it is expensive. In fact, many of the people when purchased CNG cost was around 55 rupees kg, around 3-4 years back. And now today it is almost near to diesel price. So people who thought of getting advantage of it, they actually are not getting. But still people are happy. In the sense, they say the CNG run vehicle have less maintenance cost. So they are saving on the maintenance cost. That means moving to CNG. And in fact, I was told last week that there is experiment of 18% hydrogen being mixed with CNG called HCNG, something like that. 20%, yeah, 18 or something. Yeah, that is something very positive if that happens. And next is most preferred move should be LNG actually. Because LNG you can carry, you can go, you have a range of 1200 kilometers without filling. If you really LNG is available, because you don't need so many CNG station like CNG station for LNG, because only thing is the tank is it has to maintain minus 160 degree. You need cryogenic tank, and the only 2 manufacturers are there. I think interim if LNG is pushed and LNG terminals are provided, you are reducing the CO2 by 25 to 35%. The different claims are there. I'm not sure about it. So around 25 to 35% you are achieving in next 3 to 4, 5 years. And for transitioning from ICE engine to, it is not actually transitioning, it is almost same engine, only the tank and I think some fitment changes need to be there. I'm not technical on that. But the cost increases by around 20% for the normal vehicle, which is affordable. And whether battery-backed electric vehicles is it a final technology? Nobody is sure. There's no finality on electric being the final solution, because diesel as a technology remained as a foremost for 50 years nearly. Earlier it was everything petrol. So I think this kind of a certainty is needed for a finance company to be little aggressive on lending. But in our case, we are pushing on 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers quite aggressively. And I would like to say that whatever is selling today, same proportionate we are able to finance. And without really no additional cost. We are not really adding more cost, or we are not asking more margins from the customers. We are quite comfortable. Even acquisition cost is around 20% higher. We are quite comfortable because there is advantages in operational cost, because there is a significant savings on the operational cost. So overall, I think from a financing part of it, we are quite open and we are clear, and we are also pushing, because I am also looking at getting refinance from green focused funds internationally, because internationally green focused funds are available. In India, those it is not still prevalent, but I believe if I move to particular level of electric vehicle financing, I will get funds at a cheaper cost, which I can use it for the growth or pass it on to the customer. This is very clear. So for us as a finance company, ultimately we are custodian of public money. It is either a depositor or NCD holders or banks who fund us, and we need to take care of their requirement. So I think we are open, but only thing is the path to go. We need to be very clear, and we have to be measured. We cannot be rushing into the extreme, saying that there is something available and let us go to that. That's my way. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the alternatives also that you mentioned probably will be there somewhere in the ecosystem. I would say that the total cost of ownership combined with financing, unless that begins to work, there will be challenges in the kind of objectives that we set ourselves. Of course, regulations, emission related regulations and all can always push. That will be at some other cost. Now, thank you all for your, I thank the panelists for their views. It's an opportunity to open up the discussion to the floor. So there, yeah. You can be brief, make a comment. It doesn't have to be a question, but you can ask a question also. And if you want to indicate whom you are addressing it to, please.
Important facet, like I'm active researcher in the field of EV. So we speak with consumers, the small scale consumers, two-wheelers and four-wheelers. We see the major deterrent is in the case of acceleration of the vehicles, the mileage. If we accelerate more, the mileage will be affected in case of EV. When we speak of the freight transportation, where they have a target, they have to reach the spot by 2 days or 3 days. They cannot accelerate more than 60 km/h. So it is affecting their freight time. So don't you feel that this is a major deterrent in case of freight transportation, where they have to reach the spot by time? But whereas in case of electric vehicles, we cannot accelerate more than a given range of speed. Or in case, if you're doing so, it is affecting our mileage. So how to tackle that problem?
So if you look at like technically, I think acceleration and the speed of electric vehicle is almost like comparable to the IC counterpart. But of course, there's a compromise when it comes to the range. The moment we go for a higher speed, there could be little compromise on the battery battery charge per se. But the major worry would be on the payload. When you look at the application for long distance freight movement, either we need to increase the battery size, so at least you can cover a longer distance. The moment we increase the battery size, we're somewhere compromising on the payload of the vehicle. The solution is like, see, there is no point in increasing the battery size significantly, which will increase the cost of the vehicle also. The solution is more towards like enabling the charging infrastructure. So where at least like we can look at lowering the battery size, maybe like in the coming years when we have more advanced battery chemistries with higher energy density batteries, the size and the volume of the battery packs would be lower. And having such like fast charging technologies like pantograph, maybe like higher capacity charging station at frequent intervals at least would give that a kind of leverage for the freight companies to move towards electric vehicle, because the running cost would be much lower when they compare with the similar the IC counterpart. So I think performance wise, I think it's almost like comparable, because we have seen at least the bus operation, because in Delhi we're operating close to 300 electric buses, and when the range is like around 200 kilometers, the performance, the acceleration, the driving comfort are much higher when compared to IC counterpart.
Yeah. Just, the parameter at the time of model approval, when the regulators approve the model, so at present, I think certain categories we have, like light vehicles, we have corresponding models in the passenger segment. So roughly similar performance parameters will be available on the freight side in within city freight. But I think the challenge right now is availability of electric models for long distance freight. Another question? Yeah.
This is Pradeep. I represent OMI Foundation. We are a policy research think tank. My question is for Mr. Sameer. Sameer, in one of the research that we found with respect to public charging infrastructure, energy operators are not interested in PPP in certain states because there is ceiling with respect to tariff, or I would call it as a lower ceiling. But in states like Delhi, there is nothing like ceiling when it comes to tariff for the energy operators who are entering PPP. But we need an affordable public charging stations, but at the same time, we need a good number when it comes to fleet electrification also. So as a central nodal agency, how are you trying to find the middle ground, like in terms of carrying the aspirations of both the energy operator and also the end user? Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting question. Actually, recently in the month of November last year, Ministry of Power has set up a committee to address this issue of ceiling limit. And that committee has already given its recommendation regarding setting up of ceiling limits. And we already have in place you will shortly hear that there would be a ceiling limit, a nationalized, it will be standardized limit for both LT as well as for HT. So it would be rupees per kilowatt hour that you are of charging that you are paying. That model has already been developed, and very soon, let me give you a ballpark idea of that. Would be somewhere around 10 rupees for LT and would be somewhere around 16 rupees for HT. This is the service charge. So the energy charges would be additional. That is somewhere around 6 to 7 rupees of average cost of supply. That would be additional to it. So it would be somewhere around 16 rupees and 23 rupees. This is being worked over. Maybe this changes, but I've given you an idea of how it will look. And we are also planning to give some discounts for open access to promote the use of renewable energy. These discounts will be to the tune of somewhere around 15 to 30%. So that to that aspect, we are that has been taken care of. And you will shortly hear an announcement from the Ministry of Health to that extent.
I had a question actually. I would like to just ask the panel, recently there has been a news that the prices of battery, the unit prices of the battery have increased for the first time. So, it has been around $151 per unit. So how would it affect the TCO calculations what we have been doing and the subsidies, which how are we going to plan on that in terms of passenger or the train segments?
Yeah, so I think, yes, it happened last year, but these commodity prices do fluctuate and we will see up and down. You also heard a recent article that India has found a huge lithium deposit as well. So these articles, so these news items will come and go. But I think, as I said, if you look at what is happening in the Europe and what will happen in the UK and US, the geographies are making a decision toward a certain technology. We can be technology agnostic, and as a researcher, I would love to be technologically neutral and say, I want this outcome, let the technology decide. But the problem with that is that you have to make investment, and you don't have enough money, enough time to make investment in all fields. I will have biodiesel, I will have CNG, I have a PNG, I have hydrogen, I will have everything. You don't have that much time and money. So you have to limit your technological choice. What is it that can deliver on the goals that we are set with? So that's the ultimate idea, but these fluctuations will happen, and that's not something to be seriously worried about.
Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
We'll have one last.
Thank you, first of all. My name is Gaurav Singh. I am representing Johnson Controls. Basically, my question to panelists is that we are planning ahead with the electrical based vehicles. But in future, we will be having some kind of a structure which we can replace those kind of batteries and other waste which we are producing from those vehicles. So as of now, we are not having, as of my knowledge, we are not having that much of a structure in case of there are a lot of batteries is being produced and we will dispose of or recycle those kind of things. So are we having such plans for the futures as well, our investment into that particular area?
Thank you for that important question. I think it's very important. We will have to be mindful. We are right now riding on the fact that it will take a few years for these batteries and all to become, waste, and by which time we would have developed the necessary, mechanisms, rules, infrastructure. But it's a very important point. I think we'll have to be mindful. Mr. Rao wants to say something. Yeah. Right. So things are happening. But draft standard is still a draft standard. Yeah. So with that, I think I want to thank you all for a very, attentive and very participatory discussion. And I want to thank the panelists also for their, inputs for this discussion. And I am not going to try and summarize anything except to take the point Mr. Bhatt said that we need phase 3 of FAME. I think I like that idea. FAME 2 can go into FAME 3 and we can incorporate some of the points that are emerging from such discussion. And the important thing, which sometimes we lose sight of, is that I think whatever we do should be done with stakeholder engagement, taking people's perspective into account. There's a lot that is available. Often we make the mistake of not doing that, and then we make costly mistakes in policy. Other than that, I think wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'll now request Sharif.
Yeah, so I would now like to invite Mr. Sharif Kamar, fellow and area convener TERI, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you so much. I think it has been a really engaging conversation. I would first request Sihab sir to hand over the token of appreciation to our speaker. To Mr. Pandita. Ms Trupti. Mr. Mohan. Mr. Anish. And Mr. Bhatt. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience as well. Some of the reports that we have been working on, and it's been like 5 years now since we started working on the commercial vehicle segment, the electrification of the same. Some of the reports are outside. You can do the QR scan and go through the report as well. And at that time, so only the startups were there in the three-wheeler segment, which we're talking about the electrification. And we have come a long way since then. We have multiple models right now, even in the four-wheeler segment. And this, I think, is a good start for the LCV and the HDV sector also, because we do see some of the startups working in this segment as well now. So hope to see you all around in the WSTS as well. And I would like to thank the speakers particularly for joining us, particularly Mr. Umesh, who has traveled all the way from Mumbai to participate in this session. Also request all the delegates and audience to be part of other sessions that we are organizing as part of WSTS. So there is one session on public transportation that is happening at 2 p.m. today, and another on e-commerce electrification again at 2 p.m. So you'll have a tough choice of deciding which session to go. But that's how things are at this session this year of WSTS. I'll request you all to join us for lunch, which is at Margosa Lawn, and see you there around. Thank you so much, sir, for moderating the session, sir.